right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of your time with me this afternoon. In addition to the things I'm going to talk about, which I'm going to go pretty fast because we only have 30 minutes, I prepared an extensive handout for you, and I hope you'll grab a copy of it. It's available. I'm not even sure where on the website that they're making these handouts available, but it's available there. And I'll also give you a link at the end of my presentation where you can grab a copy directly if you'd like to. So there are a number of different approaches I considered to take with this presentation this afternoon. I was going to do it one way when I was going to be in Colorado with the rest of you right now. Unfortunately, life had other plans for us. But so what I've decided to do is kind of frame it in terms of online learning. Many of us will be teaching online some or all the time this fall. So I hope that doing it this way will provide you with the best opportunity to make what I talk about immediately applicable. When I read through social media online, I see continuing angst over all the things that can't be done. Of course, primary among this is ensemble playing, which just is not possible online, given our current state of technology generally available. And it's really easy. I find myself doing it as well to get caught up in what you don't have or what you can't do. But I would challenge you to instead think about celebrating that everything that you can offer students and how you can make a difference in their lives. I also suggest that we really try to focus a little bit on what is possible, and not a little bit, but we do focus on what is possible, but also thinking about maybe some things that we haven't done real well in traditional music education, that this will give us an opportunity to actually kind of refocus, reset ourselves, and do things that maybe have been a little bit subpar in the past. I think one of those things that we can do is facilitate the development of creative musicianship of each individual student. Sometimes in our traditional music education programs, the educational growth of a single student gets kind of put in the back seat compared to group outcomes that we have for students. And I'm not bad mouthing group outcomes. Those are really valuable. I'm a former high school band and orchestra director. I still love playing in bands. It's great. It's just not something that we can do right now. And also maybe we can do it a little bit better when we come back to it. So I don't think that we have to totally neglect the individual at any point in time, whether we're in a traditional setting or we're online. But right now, I think we can really use this time to focus on the individual musicianship of students. And I think that technology can really help with this endeavor. There we go. So before we go any further, I want to talk about exactly what I mean when I say creativity. So the definition I like is this one here. Because the creative process is cognitive, it happens up here. Dr. Peter Webster, who's one of the leading researchers and educators on musical creativity in the world, talks about it as creative thinking. And his definition is the one I have here on this slide. So creative thinking in music is the engagement of the mind in the active, structured process of thinking in sound for the purpose of producing some product that is new for the creator. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about creative musicking, creative thinking in music. Basically, I believe that everybody can be musically creative. I believe that music education is well suited to develop creative thinking. And I believe that technology can help us as teachers and help our students to be musically creative. So when researchers ask teachers why there isn't more creative activities going on in their classes and rehearsals, teachers, by and large, talk about a couple of different issues. The first is that many teachers don't feel that they have the requisite creative skills themselves. They've never been helped to develop them. And if you don't know how to do something, you're not likely to be able to, or certainly be confident with trying to teach it to somebody else. So that's one problem. Teachers themselves are not necessarily don't necessarily have that creative background. And again, keep in mind here, I'm talking in generalities. I would guess many of you out there listening to me right now are maybe exceptions to that rule just by the nature of this conference. But I'm talking about generalities in music education classes across the country. The other issue that teachers tell us is that they don't understand how to teach students creative activities, creative disciplines. They don't understand the pedagogy for this. So if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. I have a 70-piece band. How do I engage those students in composition? Not necessarily intuitive about how you do that. Undergraduate music education curricula don't often address the pedagogy for teaching improvisation or composition in various music settings. That just hasn't been part of what we've done. So this is another issue we need to deal with. I'm going to add a third one. This is mine. This isn't from the research, but just in my observation, I think our music education and culture, the culture of our music education in schools, in communities, as it traditionally has existed, is not necessarily conducive to creative musical outcomes. In particular, there are in many places in this country, in many states, where competition is a huge part of music education. I know in the state of Florida, there are many programs where whatever's happening in that program is organized around whatever competitive event is coming up next for the Florida Education Association. And so there's value that some people find in competition, but when you're so focused on that, when it becomes so narrow about what you're doing, and that really is group outcomes, I think there's a tendency to not even consider doing something a little different, doing something creative, engaging your students creatively, because you feel the pressure maybe from administration, maybe from community at large to get things done. So that's another issue I think we have. I think that technology can help us deal with all three of these issues, though, with teachers not having the creative background themselves, with teachers not understanding pedagogically how to approach this with students, and with our culture. And some ways that I think it can do that are through scaffolding content for teachers and students, from helping us to sequence instruction for students, to helping us to differentiate instruction for individual students, and providing free and inexpensive tools that allow everyone to be creative. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on 4 creative musical experiences. Improvisation, which I define as spontaneously performing original music. Composition, which is creating and capturing original musical ideas. Performing others' music, and this is expressive performance. This is something that probably most people of the 4 of these things here are most comfortable with and most skilled with, and it's something we do to a degree teach students. And then finally, creative listening, which you may not have thought about listening as being a creative activity, but a lot of people think it can be if approached correctly, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, we have limited time here, about 20 more minutes, and so I'm not able to go into depth too much on any of these issues, but what I hope to do is present some kind of conceptual ideas for you to think about that maybe you can apply to your own situation, and then give you some examples of some entry points with technology for each of these areas. So we'll start with improvising. So when people think about improvisation, they often think of jazz. But of course, jazz isn't the only type of music that involves improvisation. It plays a key role in most vernacular musics, rock, pop, and folk musics. Musics of non-Western cultures often have improvisation as part of them. And historically, many Western art musics do as well. For instance, the concertos, cadenzas of concertos, which were traditionally improvisatory. Um, Interestingly, when researchers have studied improvisation, particularly with students, they found that not only does improvisation provide a great creative outlet for students, but it also helps them in other kind of more traditional music settings. For instance, um, if students can improvise, they also tend to have a better understanding of notated music. They often are able to achieve at higher levels of performance. They're better sight readers, and they have better oral skills. So when we look at music education programs in our schools right now, we often see improvisatory activities in elementary general music classes, particularly if the teacher uses Orff, Dalcroze, maybe Ed Gordon approaches, where improvisation is kind of inherent in those. But we don't see it too often in other realms of music education, and even the jazz band, which is where it might come into play. But you know, for example, I played trombone in my high school and in college jazz bands, and rarely was I asked to improvise. Pretty much the rehearsals were run like a concert band rehearsal, only it was jazz music that was being rehearsed. So rarely was I asked to improvise as a trombonist. And when I was, I really wasn't ever given any instruction about how to do that. So how can technology help us get through some of these hurdles and get moving in the right direction? In Peter Webster's model of creative thinking in music, he talks about enabling skills and enabling conditions. So I'll start with enabling conditions are the things about your classroom, whether that's an online classroom or your traditional face-to-face classroom, that can help to facilitate creativity just by the nature of how comfortable students feel in there. For instance, are they afraid to make mistakes because you can't really be creative without making some mistakes along the way? Is creativity encouraged? Are they given the tools they need, the space they need, the time they need to be creative? All those things are enabling conditions. To be creative, we also need enabling skills for improvisation. And one of the big ones, skills are just what it sounds like, those musical tools that we need to help us to engage the creative ideas we have in our brain. And probably there's no skill larger than oral skills and the ability to audiate music. So there are a number of apps and websites that can be used to develop oral skills. One of my favorites is the one I've pictured here, musictheory.net. They also have apps, theory lessons, Tenuto, which are pictured there. There's many, many others, both online, cloud-based, and also software that you can download and install to your computer. But using these sort of things can really help in developing students' oral skills, which will then help to enable them to be creative in other ways, including improvisation. So we kind of have a love-hate relationship right now with these video conferencing platforms because we need to spend a lot of time on them. But I think we're beginning to learn some pedagogy for using these in ways that are beneficial for us and for our students. In terms of improvisation, I think you can use a tool like Zoom to engage students in responding to rhythmic and tonal patterns of music. So for instance, you could have all students mute their mics, and then you could give a tonal pattern, and then students could repeat it. Again, their mics off, so nobody's going to hear them. They aren't going to hear each other. There won't be this cacophony of sound, but you're going to get this back and forth sort of thing. So you initiate the prompt, they try to echo it initially. Second, once you feel like students are pretty good at that, then you can initiate the prompt, and they could do something different with the same materials, the same tonal pattern, the same basic rhythms, quarter, eighth notes, whatever you happen to be working on at that particular time. So you can give the prompt, they can improvise then and answer. Again, doing this initially where everybody has their mics off. This also creates kind of a safe, enabling condition for students where they aren't going to be afraid of sounding foolish or making mistakes because nobody else can hear them except themselves. But eventually what you can do then is that you can give the prompt and you can have individual students turn on their mics, and then you can begin to see how those individual students are doing, give them feedback on that, and help them progress. So that's a second idea about improvisation in the online world. A third idea is, and this comes back a couple more times here in my presentation, but the use of video. Video has become so important to what we do, not only video like this, live video, but recorded video. And, I never would have thought it would be so important as it is now. And we've probably all developed a lot of video skills and are continuing trying to develop video skills that we can use with our students. One way that you can begin to get the concept of improvisation across the students and get them to experience it to some degree is through body percussion. I saw that there was a session earlier today on stomp style body percussion. And so if you didn't attend that, you might want to go look at the video later on. I'm sure there's lots of great ideas in there that go beyond what I'm going to talk about. But you can give students some ideas about body percussion. You can show them some videos. There's some YouTube videos of people doing body percussion. And then you can ask them to create something maybe to a favorite song, or you could give them backing tracks and have them do it, record themselves do it, and then submit that recording to you. You may even want to bring those, share those with the entire class if students are willing to do that, and that's something that you want to do, and then have a discussion among your whole class in a platform like Zoom, where you can talk about the different effects that were used, the different ways that rhythm was improvised, varied, the kind of response people had to that. Lots of good conversations that could come out of that. And then last but not least, backing tracks. So if you're doing whether you're doing body percussion, rhythm percussion, or you're doing percussion that's more melodic and tonal based, backing tracks are great. First of all, they're just fun, right? I prefer to practice with a backing track than without it. And it's more motivational for students, and it's something they enjoy. And so there are a lot of sources for these. I'll just talk about a couple of them here. I have them listed on screen, a number of different ones, and you can look at my handout. But two of my favorites are, first of all, YouTube. There's lots of backing tracks on there. There's a function of YouTube that I don't know if you're aware of. The little gear icon that you see down underneath your video, if you click on that, you can vary the speed of those tracks, and you can slow it down or speed it up, I suppose, if you want to, without changing the pitch. So that's a real handy tool that we have for using backing tracks with students. My other kind of favorite in this, people have mixed opinions about the quality of these accompaniments, but I think they're pretty good, especially at the beginning and intermediate level, and that's iReal Pro, which is a tool that basically kind of creates a rhythm section to go along with a set of chord changes that either you can provide or you can download lots and lots and lots of songs. I don't know, thousands of songs probably from their website. And the app costs a little bit of money, but downloading the songs is all free, or you can input your own songs. And it's not just jazz songs. There's lots of pop rock sort of songs as well. So those are my ideas to get started with improvisation. Let's talk now about composition. So there are a couple of different approaches to composition that are common today. One utilizes standard musical notation, and the other involves non-notational composition strategies, often facilitated by some sort of software Um, One of the main types of software that is used for this are digital audio workstations, or DAWs. We'll talk about a couple of those in just a moment. Advocates who think that these non-notational approaches to composition are good point out that younger students who don't yet read music can really profit from these by uh, thinking in sound and trying to combine, for instance, loops in different ways, and thinking about how they go together well, or what works and what doesn't, or what causes certain effects that they like and what causes certain things that they don't like. So it's really good for younger students. It's also good for older students, those maybe who aren't in our traditional classes, band, orchestra, and choir, who have an interest in music, maybe have an active musical life outside of school, but aren't doing much in school. And this is, of course, where Little Kids Rock and Modern Band really is staking a claim, is to address those students. But technology can do that as well. And particularly some of these things that I'm going to be talking about here. So these are a bunch of different icons on here. Let's start with the notation-based ones first. Probably you're familiar with many of these. Noteflight and MuseScore are traditional notation. Noteflight is a really cool tool because it's cloud-based. And when something is cloud-based, that means there's nothing for you to install, nothing for students to install. It can be used on any internet-capable device. Of course, that can be a problem if your students don't have internet connectivity outside of school. But I guess all online teaching is a problem if that's an issue that you face. It can be when we are back in school on a regular basis, students can start something at school and then go home and work on it further if it's all in Noteflight, because it's all in one virtual space. Noteflight in particular has free and subscription-based versions. And the subscriptions are very reasonable, I think. I know if you don't have any budget, it's not reasonable, but as these things go, it's very reasonable. And they even have a version where you kind of have a walled garden and you can have a classroom and so forth. And so I would encourage you to check that out. MuseScore is more of a traditional based notation program like Sibelius or Finale or something like that, except I think in many ways it's easier to use and it's free. It's totally free. You download it to a computer and use it in that way. The non-notation based composition approaches and tools. I'll start with the upper right there, just below my picture. That's Groove Pizza, which some of you may be familiar with. It's kind of a cool approach to making beats, and it also has some interdisciplinary possibilities if that's something you're interested in. In the middle there, we have Soundtrap, which is like an online GarageBand. It's a DAW, it's a digital audio workstation. If you have all Apple computers and can use GarageBand, that's my favorite. And it's Soundtrap keeps getting better. It's not quite as robust as GarageBand though, but it is cloud-based again, so it has all of those advantages, and you can do a lot with Soundtrap, even connect it to MIDI devices and things like that. And then in the lower left there, that's a screenshot of a app from the Chrome Music Lab, which you should check out all those apps if you don't know of that already. And that's called Songmaker, which is a very easy point and click way for students to put in a melodic line and a rhythmic accompaniment. So those are some ways technology can help you get started with your students in composition. Creative performance of others' music. So as I mentioned, I think this is the thing that most music teachers and their students are probably the best at. Notation is an imperfect system for writing music. Composers provide us with varying details about the sonic image they have for their music, but even in the best of circumstances, performers have to make creative musical decisions about how to interpret what a composer has indicated. So these expressive decisions are really at the heart of creative music performance of others' music. These expressive choices that are made by performers and conductors are what create musical performances that cause people to have an emotional response to it, which many people if not most people would say is the most important outcome of music, is creating an emotional response in those who listen to your music. Too often in school music situations, though, the creative decisions are made by the teacher or the director and then told to the students to go ahead and implement. And we need to engage our students more in these creative decision making by making our classes more learner centered or teacher centered. They need to have the opportunity and be empowered to make these decisions facilitated by us, by the teachers. So when we're thinking about expressive performances, we're really thinking about this musical toolkit. How can we vary things like timbre or tempo or rhythmic content or embellishing melodic material or substituting chords to change the harmony slightly, altering dynamics, things like that. So we need to teach students about those tools we have for creating musical performances. And then uh, as we're doing that, I think one of the strengths of how we learn this sort of thing is through models. And of course, YouTube, other video resources, and I don't have it on the slide here, but also certainly streaming music services and recordings are the way we kind of develop this vocabulary as musicians about the sonic possibilities of being expressive with music. So all those things, talking about the tools, looking at models, creating playlists of maybe several different versions of a piece of music, having a discussion around that. How did these performers vary it in different ways? What was your reaction to that? What sort of different responses did you have? And so forth. Another thing you can have students do is record themselves and send you the audio or video file for feedback and discussion. One great first assignment would be to let them choose a melody, or you give them a melody, have them play it flat with no expression at all, which can be hard for some students to do, and then have them do two different variations on it, two different expressive variations, and discuss what they did, maybe share these again with the whole class in an online platform like Zoom, and begin to get them thinking about how they can be creatively expressive with music. Finally, we can ask students to cover a tune. You can do this in something like Soundtrap, where they create a cover of their favorite tune. Use apps like Acapella. I have pictured here on the slide, probably many of you have seen them. If not, they're worth looking up on YouTube. But Jimmy Fallon and the Roots do these covers of their musical guest music. Here's one with Ringo Starr here, pictured here. They're absolutely terrific, and I encourage you to look at them if you aren't familiar with them. Last but not least, creative listening in music. So you may not think of listening as being a creative process. However, there's a number of researchers and teachers who provide evidence that listening to music can be creative if we approach it in that way. So when you think about how you listen to music, how you listen to it any particular point in time is going to be dependent on what your musical background is, kind of what your mood is at the moment, what your goals are for listening to the music. Are you listening to music to relax? Are you listening to music to keep your heart rate up as you're exercising? You know, what are your goals for listening to it? Is it more of a social sort of thing? Where's your focus of attention? Are you if we're focusing on one aspect of the music, we may not be attending to something else. So all those things taken together create kind of a unique musical experience every time we listen to a piece of music. In fact, I'm sure many of you have experienced when you listen to something one time and then you listen to it again, you hear things that you didn't hear the first time. And that's how music listening is created, in that it's based on constructivism, if you're familiar with that learning theory. And every time somebody hears a piece of music, it's a little bit different for that person than it is for anyone else because of all of those things that I've mentioned. As we're thinking about creative listening, the concept of convergent versus divergent thinking can help us in this process. So convergent means there's one correct response. This is the way school works most of the time. You know, there's a math problem, there's one answer. There's one answer on the standardized test where you fill in the bubble. And really, it's the way we've traditionally taught music listening a lot also. So asking questions like, is this song in major or minor? There's one correct answer for that. What instrument is playing the melody here? Again, one correct answer for that. Divergent thinking, on the other hand, there could be multiple correct responses. So divergent listening teaches ways of listening. And questions like, what do you find most interesting in this piece, could have lots of different answers. How would you move to this piece of music? Again, have the student show you how they would move. Lots of different possible responses there. What we can do is apply 4 concepts from the psychology of creativity to the creative listening process to help us approach this pedagogically. These are fluency, flexibility, elaboration, and originality, or unique ideas. Fluency means just lots and lots and lots of different ideas, not just saying, oh, here's what I hear, but what else do you hear? Coming up with a whole list of things. Flexibility is things in different categories. For instance, what do you hear rhythmically? How does this piece move you emotionally? What do you hear happening with the instrumentation? So trying to come up with lots of different categories of things. Elaboration is connecting those things. So what's your emotional response to this music? What is it about the melody or the rhythm or the harmony that's causing that emotional response? And then originality can be thought of as, what's something that you're thinking about this that you don't think anybody else will think about as you're listening to it. There's a great article on this by John Kratis. It's called Music Listening is Creative. It's in a 2017 MEJ. I have it linked from my handout. I really encourage you to take a look at that article to get some more background on this. We have lots of technologies for creative listening. Never before in the history of the world have we access to, much of it free, so many different kinds and sources for music, and I listed a bunch of them on here. So again, you can have students create playlists, you can create playlists for them to listen to. You can have discussions and Zoom around listening to music. By the way, Zoom keeps improving their music game, and there's ways now you can share just your sound in Zoom, and it's, you know, it's not absolutely fantastic quality, but it's usable, and I imagine it'll keep getting better. You can have students have a listening journal of some sort, or a listening blog using a tool like Blogger if you don't have one built into your learning management system. And if you don't have a learning management system, I really encourage you to use one kind of to organize all of your online teaching. It's very, very helpful. Google Classroom's great and it's free. There's a free version of Canvas. It's what we use at the University of Florida as Canvas. And I like it a lot too. Probably your school has one, but if not, take a look at that. So we are out of time and I'm just about to the end here, but if any of these ideas intrigue you at all and you'd like some other sources of information, some other resources about it, I have a book, Music Learning Today. The second edition of the book is coming out here almost any day, certainly within the next couple of weeks. And it's all about this sort of thing, about looking at the research and best practices in teaching music, and then trying to map technology onto that to see how we can use technology to provide our students with the best experience possible. I promised you I would give you a link, and there's a QR code for my handout. So if you'd like to grab that right now, you can. And I'll just leave this slide up here. I haven't been watching the chat. I know our formal time is over, but if you would like to ask any questions or have other ideas related to this that might be of value to other people, I'm glad to hang around for a while and let you do that. So the chat here, I'm beginning to scroll through that. Ireland, Los Angeles, New York, Georgia. That's a great thing about an online conference, right? Easy for people from all over to get here. Let's see. Lots of hellos. Appreciate your thanks. My email is on the handout, so you can get it there, but it's WBAUER at ufl.edu. wbauer at ufl.edu. If I don't have the code, is there another way to get the handout? Yeah, the URL right at the bottom of the screen there, tinyurl.com/modern-band-2020. I'll take you right to it. It's a Google Doc. Aaron, great to hear you're using my book. Thanks. I think I've enabled audio, maybe, not sure. But I'm also looking at the chat if there's anything else. Sorry if I've missed something. If I missed you, maybe put the question in again so it comes up to the top of the chat. Liz says thoughts on student engagement, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, Liz. Hang on just a few more moments in case anyone has anything else. What age would you start using GarageBand or similar tools? I think you know there are some like Music First has some um, web-based software that is really suited for very young children. But early elementary, I think students can start using GarageBand and things with loops. It's you know, this is the world they've grown up in, and you just show them a little bit how it works, and they can go to town on it. So I think that's another advantage, obviously, to the non-notation based composition is that very young students can use this. Do you know any virtual material to teach the basic elements of music? Well, those music theory sites, I think, do that to some degree. Um, Certainly melody, harmony, I don't know texture so much, but form. Um, so there's programs like that. Um, you should look at Music First's programs. Some of those address the very basic elements of music. I know if you're doing general music, Quaver Music has things that are related to kind of those basic elements of music. I think the important thing, though, is again using the technology in a way that's really going to help students develop their musical understandings. Like there's ways you can use technology to have students learn the definition of what a melody is, but that's pretty superficial, I think. Instead, I think you want to use technology so that students can create their own melodies, and then from that experience, you can draw concepts. You know, it's the old adage: experience then label, or practice before theory. You want students to experience those things in whatever creative ways you can think of as a teacher, uh, and then provide labels to it, not the other way around. Okay, I'll give it a couple more minutes and then I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day. Yeah, for sure, Maria. And again, that's really the whole approach of my book also. It's based on a concept of technology education called TPAC, technological, excuse me, technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. And what that means basically is that we need three forms of understanding to be able to effectively use technology. We need to know our subject matter, which is music for us. We need to understand technology, obviously, and the tools that are available to us. And we need to understand pedagogy for how to teach our subject. But all three of those things interact with each other, and sometimes one can influence another. And again, we need to start with what it is we want students to know and be able to do with music, and then think about how technology can support this, not use technology just for technology's sake. Um, we also need to, part of the TBAC model also is the context in which we're teaching. So, if you're in a school where every student has their own device, that's one particular concept, one particular context. If you're in a school where you have a computer and that's it, that's a whole different context. And so a school where students have access to broadband outside of school and a school system where that isn't the case. All those things need to figure into what we do with technology and to use it effectively and use it to the benefit of students. The article that I referenced for creative listening was John Kratis's 2017 MEJ article, but all those articles are good. Jody Kirshner has a book, I think I have it on the handout, that also is really good. If you do a lot of listening with your students, you got to get Jody's book. All right, looks like maybe we've run our course. You're welcome, Christine. So thank you again for spending some time with me this afternoon. Please, I'd love to hear from you, things you're doing um, with or without technology related to creativity, and certainly things that you are doing technologically with students as well. So thanks a lot. Hope you have a good rest of your conference.